Rabbi say we're on DAF Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Amarle, the second line. Amarle Rav LeRav Asi. Lo Sadr B'Masa de Lo Tzanif Basusya V'Lanovach V'Kalba. Don't live in a town where the horses do not neigh and the dogs don't bark. And the reason why, the Rashbam explains, is because these are your early security systems for intruders and for ganavim and things like that. And if you don't have a good dog, a good horse, you won't know when the intruders are coming.
What means in English neigh? A horse could not neigh?
Yeah, neigh. It's the sound.
What is
sound?
The sound that a horse makes.
That's the sound that a
The
horse
sound that a horse makes. How do you say that in Yiddish?
Irzen.
The Irzen.
Irzen.
Irzen, okay.
Persian.
The Al-Sadur Be'ir, Val-Tadur Be'ir Deresh Masa Asya. Do not live in a town where the head of the town is a doctor. It doesn't say why.
No rabbis, no doctors.
Right. So,
doesn't have to worry.
what?
Doesn't have to worry about that.
Right. Yeah, Rob Ford is not exactly a doctor. But anyway,
Well, he knows pharmaceuticals.
yeah. Very good. Oh, you missed the good Gemara yesterday for tax people. We talked about don't evade the tax man. Okay, but anyway, the Rashbam doesn't explain why, but it could very well be that he's preoccupied and maybe he's not going to take care of the needs of the city. Velo sinsiv tarti, inasvav tarti nasiv tlas. Don't marry two wives. I could have told you that, but if you do,
Marry three.
But if you do, marry three. In other words, never have an even number of wives. The reason is because if you have two wives, they'll conspire against you without your knowledge. But if you have a third wife, she'll be able to tell you what the other two are conspiring. Okay.
I thought it was Zugas.
Amar le Rav LeRav Kahana Hapoch. Bob, you missed the Gemara about not having a doctor as the head of a city.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
I decline.
Amar le Rav LeRav Kahana Hapoch benavelta velo sepoch b'mili. Better that you should do business with a dead carcass of an animal instead of just dealing with words. In other words, do something that's tachlistic. In other words, even if it's a lowly occupation, better that you should deal with something that you have to do physical exertion than just to be like in an ivory tower. Peshot nevelta beshuka v'shakal igra v'lotema kahana ana v'gaver rabba ana v'sanya b'milsa. Better that you should flay a dead carcass in the marketplace and get paid for it instead of saying, I'm a Kohen or I'm an important person and it's beneath my dignity to do those things. Right? These are things that we should be teaching our children, by the way. You know, some of our kids don't realize that there's honor in being a plumber. There's honor in being...
There's money in it, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just a pipe dream.
That's right. Right. In other words, there's honor in menial labor.
In a trade.
In a trade, absolutely. There's honor in being a butcher. There's honor in those occupations. And it's better to do that than to, sometimes than to spend 20 years working on your PhD. Okay.
I'm constantly writing
Not nuclear physics PhD.
That's right.
I'm constantly writing this thing.
Yes. Okay. That's right. Okay, so now you have the Gemara to quote it. Okay. Salkas le'igra sherusach bahadach, that when you go on the road, when you go out on the road, make sure you have your food with you. Because me'akari b'masa bezuza tusik nefecha nihavu. That even if food is really inexpensive, you can get 100 pumpkins for one zuz. Nevertheless, keep your provisions when you travel underneath your cloak, because just because it's cheap in town doesn't mean you're going to necessarily find inexpensive food on the road. Amrle Rav l'chia berei lo tishti sama velo tishaver nigra. He says the following things to his son. He says, don't drink medicines. And the Rashbam and Rashi, this is a very important statement. What it means is, don't get addicted to medicine. Don't get addicted to pharmaceuticals, because there'll come a time when the drug is not available and you're going to go into withdrawal. So therefore, it's not a good idea to get into the habit of getting addicted to medicines. Velo seshaver nigra. Don't take wide or broad steps, because that leads to blindness. And also, don't have your teeth removed. Meaning, if you have a toothache and the dentist says we should take out your tooth, get a second opinion. Why? Because if they take out the toothache may go away, but you can never put the tooth back. So sometimes it's better to wait to get another therapy other than taking out the tooth. Don't provoke a snake, and don't provoke a non-Jew. Tanu Rabbanan, Gimel ein miskanin bahen ve'eluhen. The following three should not be provoked. And they are Nachri Katan, V'Nachash Katan, V'Talmud Katan. Now these are all things that you may think, they can't bother me, they're nobodies, right? But they grow up one day. They are a small, like a little Italian kid. You say to yourself, what difference does it make if I'm rude to him? He can't do anything to me. But in 10 years, he'll be a big Italian kid, and he may end up...
Works the other way as well. You're nice to a little kid, and you never
That's
know.
right, and that's right. And then... so Nachash Katan, a small snake, and a small student. Meaning a student, you may say, he doesn't know anything, he's a little pisher. But one day he's going to get older, he may become the Rosh Hashiva, and he'll be telling you what the pshat in the Gemara is. So my time at the Malchusayu Achori Udnaihu Koi. The reason is because their kingdom, so to speak, is behind their ears. In other words, they have their future ahead of them, and you don't know what they're going to turn out to be. Amar le Rav leibo berei. Tarchi bach b'shmaita v'lo mistaya milsa ta'agmarach mila da'alma. A very fascinating statement. Rav had a son whose name was Ibo, and he said to his son, listen, I see I've invested a lot of time to get you into the finest yeshivas, but it's gaitnisht, in other words, you're not destined to be a Rosh Yeshiva. So let me teach you some of the ways of the world, so that when you go out into the world of finance or industry, you'll know what to do. A very pragmatic statement of Rav, which we also have to realize. Not everyone's child is meant to stay in the base medrash for prolonged periods of time. So let me teach you some practical issues. He says, Adechala akarech zavinach zavin. He says, while the sand is still on your feet from your travels, sell your merchandise. Don't tarry. Once you import stuff, get rid of it as quickly as possible. Kol mili zavin utecharet bar mechamra de zavin velo techaret. All merchandise, you have a right to have remorse if you sell it, because maybe you could have gotten a better price. But when you sell wine, never look back, because you're always, even if you could have gotten a better price, but you know what? By the time you would have gotten the better price, it could have turned sour. So it's a good, never look back on when you sell wine. Shari kisecha pisach sakecha. And also, he says, first open up your wallet and then open up your merchandise bag, which means don't sell on credit. Take the money first and then offer the buyer the merchandise. Kaba me ara below kura me igra. That it's always better to buy a kav of merchandise from your local place than to buy a much larger amount of kur from the path. In other words, from the road. In other words, it's better not to have to travel to China if you can avoid it.
Bird in hand.
Yeah, I'm saying no, it's just that sometimes the burdens of the journey can be perilous and also expensive. So if you can do business with people that are more local, it's much better. Tamra b'chaluzach lebei sudna rahit. Then the next thing he says that has to do with dates. And here there was in the times of the Gemara, the belief was that there were a number of rabbis who became wealthy, especially Rav Papa, became wealthy over manufacturing sheikhar, which is made out of dates. It's a date mead or date beer. And he says that if you have dates in your basket, then you should immediately go to the beer brewer, the brewery, to brew them into dates, and don't eat them. In other words, save your investment. And v'ad kama amarava atla sasa, that even if you have just a small amount of even 3 sa'as worth of dates, quickly take them to the brewery and turn them into an investment. Amar Rav Papa, ilo de ramoy shichra lo iatri. Rav Papa says, if it weren't for the fact that I manufactured beer, I would not be so wealthy. Ika da Amri Amar Rav Chizda ilo de Ramoy Shecher lo Yavshi. Some say that this was said by Rav Chizda. My Sudna, why do you call a brewer a Sudna? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chizda Sodna'eh u'gemilus chasadim. The answer is that it's a Sodna'eh, meaning that it's a great secret to become a brewer, because you can become very wealthy off of it. It's a good investment, and you get a chance to do lots of tzedakah and chesed as a result of your income. Amar Rav Papa kol agav gavya boi, that any time that you have to write a contract, it means you have to go out and collect what is owed. In other words, what he was saying is that you're better off doing business with that doesn't require you to write contracts, because writing contracts usually means you're lending people money, and you need to go and collect it. So it's a big burden, and sometimes you're not always guaranteed. Kol ashroi safek asi safek lo asi. Anytime you sell on credit, then there's always a suffix whether you'll actually get paid or not. So be careful about that too. Uda'asi ma'os ros ninhu. And even when you do get paid back, the money is not such great money, because it usually is paid in installments, and small money is not as good as big money. In other words, it's better to get paid in one lump sum. So that's also why it's not a good idea to sell on credit.
Cash is king.
What's that?
Cash is king.
Cash is king, you betcha.
Because you can't take interest either.
You can't take interest, right? So
The problem is that there is inflation. When you get
there's also inflation, and that's right.
You're losing money.
That's right. Gimel Dvarim Amar Rabbi Yochanan Misham Anshe Yerushalayim. There were three things that Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of the wise men of Jerusalem. He said, Kishati Yotze LaMilchama Al Teitze Birishona Elo Teitze Ba'achrona Kedei Shetikanes Barishona. That when you go out to war, don't lead the charge. Stay in the back, so that when it's time to retreat, you'll be the first one back from the battle. And so, in other words, don't try not to be a hero. Do what you.
For a Jewish army? Or?
It could be even. That's not. Well, he's saying in the names of Anshe Yerushalayim, so it could even be for a. In other words, I guess he was worried about the fact that maybe during this particular period of time, Jews were not particularly prone to be successful in battle. So just be careful. Vasei Shabbat chachol ve'al titzarech labrios. Better, like we saw Rabbi Akiva say, better to make your Shabbos into a weekday than to rely on handouts. Ve'hevi mishtadel limisha hasham esachakas. We also saw this yesterday. Try to do business with someone who you see has good mazel. Shlosha dvarim amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi mishaman Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said three things in the names of the wise men of Jerusalem. Altar beganos mishumaisa shaya. Try not to do things conspicuously out in the garden, because of the event that happened, which is a reference to David and Bathsheba. Because she bathed publicly out on her roof, David saw her, and this led to sin. Another thing that he taught is that if your daughter has already become of age and you haven't found a husband for her, better that you should free your slave and be magayer him, so that you have a husband for your daughter. All right, don't try this at home. Also, be careful when you take your first item and you take your first son-in-law, be careful that your wife shouldn't get overly friendly with him. My timer, Rav Chizda Amar Mishum Erva, Rav Kahana Amar Mishum Mama. So there are two reasons. One says it's because she'll become too flirtatious and it could lead to sin. And the other opinion is that she'll love him so much she's going to spend all your money. She'll take all your money out of the bank account to spend on her new son-in-law. And Vaha Isnu, and the Gemara says that in truth, both are true. In other words, she'll become overly flirtatious with him, and also she's going to spend a lot of your money on him. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shlosha minochlei ha'olam haba. There are three people who inherit the world to come. Eluhain, Hador be'eretz Yisrael, a person who lives in Israel, of course. V'hamagadol b'nav l'talmid Torah, and a person who raises his children and sends them off to learn Torah. Of course. And the third one is a little strange. V'hamavdil al hayayin b'motzoi Shabbos, is if you use wine to make Havdalah motzoi Shabbos, you get olam haba. So the Gemara says, Mayi. So why should that be? Like the first two I understand, but what's the big Gedalia about making Havdalah on wine? The Gemara says, the Mishayer mikidusha le'avdalta. The answer is that you have limited assets, you have limited funds, and you save the cup of wine that you really wanted to use for your Shabbos Suda, and you save it for Havdalah. So that shows a certain Mesiras Nefesh, and that's why you get Olam Haba. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shlosha Machris Alein HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'chol Yom. God announces the merits of three people on a daily basis. Al Ravak Hadar Bikrach Ve'eno Chote. One is a bachelor who lives in the metropolitan areas where there's lots of women available, and he behaves himself. Ve'al Ani Hamachzir Aveda Liba'aleha, a poor man who has the integrity and honesty to return a lost object to its owner. And the final one is Ve'al Asher Hama'asir Perosav B'tzina, a wealthy man who also controls his desires and is able to give tzedakah properly with a shashtil attitude. He not looking for the fanfare. All three people have great challenges, right, to succumb to the Yetzer Hara, and they don't. The bachelor has a sexual Yetzer Hara, the poor man has a financial Yetzer Hara, and the usher has a kuvud Yetzer Hara. You see? Now, Rav Safra Ravak Hadar Bikrach Hava. Rav Safra was such a bachelor. He lived in the big city. And Tani Tana Kamei de Rav Safra Tzau Pun of the Rav Safra. When the Brisa was taught before Rav and Rav Safra started to beam because he said, ich bin oichet a Ravak. I'm a bachelor and I behave myself so that Hashem talks about me every day. So Amar Lo Rav Alav Kagon Mar. Nah. Don't think that's such a big deal. That Bryce is not talking about a guy like you, but rather Elikagon Rav Chanina of Rav Oshia dahavu ushkapi ba'ara di Yisrael dahavu yasvi b'shuka dezonos. That these two great sages were cobblers in Eretz Yisrael, and their office or their shop was in the red light district of town. Okay, va'avdi lahu misani lezonos. They used to make shoes for the prostitutes. Nice Jewish business.
They get worn out.
That's right. Ladies of the night, streetwalkers. And they would bring the shoes to the Zionus. Inhu mistakli behuv, inhu lo madlan einayu. The girls would look at them, the rabbis, and the rabbis would not even look at them when they gave them their shoes. Listu leke behu. Umu masayu hachi b'chayehen rabbanan kadishi devar Israel. But because the rabbis act so honorably, the prostitutes used to say when they would take an oath, they would say, I swear by the name or by the holy rabbis of Eretz Yisrael. So what a Kiddush Hashem. In other words, what a Kiddush Hashem, so that even the Zonos would see, the rabbis are honest people. You know, when a guy wears a long coat and a big hat, you know, he's got to have a certain integrity of behavior behind that garb. And these rabbis lived up to their garb. Halavai, that people today who wear the garb should live up to their garb. That's why I know I'm not so holy, so I don't wear a big long frock and a big black hat, because those kinds of dress come with responsibility. Okay, weiter.
You're okay, Rabbi.
Thanks. Well, I haven't succumbed yet to looking at the prostitutes when I give them their shoes.
I can say fix the soles of their shoes.
Sorry. Yes, that's right. Very good. Shlosha HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ohavan. There are three people that Hashem, the Ribono Shalom, loves. Misha eno koes, or Misha eno mishtaker, or Misha eno mamid al midoisa. Someone who doesn't lose his temper, someone who doesn't become drunk, and someone who is not unforgiving on his honor, meaning that, you know, someone who doesn't stand on ceremony, and he's moichel, that's okay, forget about it. Shlosha HaKadosh Baruch Hu sonam, but there are three people that Hashem hates, which is a pretty extreme statement. Hamedaber echa b'peh ve'echa b'lev, a person who's duplicitous and is not honest in the way that he speaks. Or another one is a person who has the ability to testify on behalf of a friend to save him in some way and neglects to do so. And the third one is if you know that a friend of yours has done an aveira and you testify about him as a single witness, Hashem hates you as well. What does that mean? So kihad tuvya chata. There was once a Maisa where a man named Tuvia did an Aveira. We don't know exactly what it was, but the insinuation is that it was something of a sexual crime. Zigod, who knew Tuvia, knew that this was going on. Maybe he was having an affair, whatever it was, and he testifies to Rav Papa, my friend Tuvia is having an affair. So Nagde Lezigod, Rav Papa gave Malchus to Zigod, the guy who came to him to testify. So Amarle Tuvia Chata v'Zigod Mingid, right? It's a famous quote from the Gemara. Tuvia sinned, and you're giving Malchus to Zigod. So the Gemara says, Amarle in Dichsiv lo Yakom Eirachad Beish, Va'at L'chudach Asad Asbei, Shem Rabba Alma Kamaf Kaspei. He says, yes, you deserve to get Malchus, because the Torah says that you cannot testify as a sole witness. You need two witnesses in order to incriminate someone. So all you're doing is being Motzi Shemrad. It's a purposeless testimony. You're just spreading slander about this guy. And therefore you should get Malchus for doing that Avera.
Do you have to come together? The Yedim have to come together?
You have to know that there's another aid.
You have to know
that there's another witness. Otherwise it's not permitted.
So is it worse than Lashon Hara, what he did, I guess, because he went to testify? Or is it Stam Lashon Hara? Well, 1/8 is really nothing anyway.
Well, he accused him of being Motzi Shemra because it's unconfirmed testimony. Unconfirmed testimony we have to assume is slander. So it's even worse than Lashon Hara, apparently. I don't know if it's because he dafka came to Beis Din. I'm not sure. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav Mutter l'Sanosa. Even though you can't testify against such a sinner, but you are allowed to hate him. Whereas if you know a guy is having an affair, of course, maybe you can't do anything about it, but you can hate the guy. You can say, I don't want to have anything to do with him. And I'll prove it to you, because the Torah says that when you see the donkey of your enemy, a person that you hate, the donkey is buckling under its load. So you have to go and help the donkey. So the question now is, who is this Sone? Who's this person that you hate? Maybe it's a Gentile. So Vahatanya Sone Shomer Sone Yisrael V'lo Sone Nachri. The Brisa says no, it's talking about a Jewish person that you hate. So how can you hate someone? Elapshita Sone Yisrael U'Mishayil Misanya. How? Since when is it ever permitted to hate a fellow Jew? He's your brother. V'aksiv lo sisnas achicha bilvavecha. You're not allowed to hate your brother in your heart. So Ela di'ika sahadi da'avid isura. So the other alternative is that there are witnesses that this guy is a Rasha because he's done sins. But the Gemara says, but if that's the case, then kuli almanami misni sani lei. So maishnahai. So then, if that's the case, why is he just the person that you hate? He should be that guy that everyone hates. So why does the pasuk dafka say that only you hate him? The answer is that you're the only one who knows the secret that this guy is a philanderer, and therefore you're allowed to hate him. It may not be permitted for you to spread this information to others. And by the way, you have to look carefully at the situation. Right? If you know that a guy is a philanderer and you think he's going to try and do something sinful with other women,
right,
and then you have an obligation to warn the other women in the community, even if you're only one witness. So there are limited applications to this halacha.
And then you still have to help him.
You have to try to change it.
You have to help his donkey. You help his donkey.
Well, you're really helping him by helping the donkey.
No, you're really helping the donkey.
I mean, it's really not a thing for him.
The objective is to be compassionate to the donkey who's buckling under its load. Now, there's also an aspect of helping him as well. You're right. I shouldn't say no so quickly. There is an aspect of doing a chesed to the guy also, because there's no reason for him to. Tosfos actually says in another place that you're actually conquering your own Yetzer Hara, that tells you that you shouldn't help a fellow Jew. So yes, you should help a fellow Jew, even though he's a Rasha, because maybe there's hope for him in the future. But at the same time, you're still allowed to hate him. Okay, it's a very complicated, it's very complex.
Hate the deeds, but not the person.
It's not
helping do tshuva too. No?
Right, it's Rabbi Meir.
Yeah.
Right, it's not so much hate the sin, but not the sinner. I don't think that's what the Gemara says, because the Gemara does describe him as the guy, as your enemy. He's your enemy because he's doing something terrible. Anyway, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar mitzvah l'sanos. It's even a mitzvah to hate him. Shenamar yiras Hashem sanas ra. That the fear of God is the hatred of evil, meaning that when you hate evil, that's actually showing your closeness with the Ribono Shalom. Amar Ravacha berei derav l'Ravashi. Mahu lememrle l'Rabbi lemisniyeh. So, is it permitted to inform your Rebbe? so that the Rebbe can hate him as well. In other words, you're not testifying in court, you're not trying to mete out punishment against the guy, but is it permitted to tell your teacher, your rabbi? So it depends on your relationship with the rabbi. If the rabbi trusts you implicitly like two witnesses, then you can tell him. But if not, there's no benefit, and you're only creating bad feelings, and which the rabbi can't take action against anyway. So therefore, you shouldn't tell him. Tana Rabbanan Shlosha Chayim Einam Chayim. There are three people whose life is not life. In other words, they have no life. Why? Because they're constantly in anguish, right? And so the three are Harachmanim, V'Haraschanim, V'Anini Hadas. A person who is overly compassionate and sensitive to the plights of others, so he sees a homeless guy on the street and it bothers him for the rest of the week. So he has no life. A Raschanim, a person who easily loses his temper, he has no life, he's always angry. And V'Anini Hadas, a person who's fastidious, that anything that's put in front of him, can't, right? He can't survive also in the big city, because he'll walk down the street and see a dog dropping in front of him, and it'll ruin his whole week. But Amar Rav Yosef Kulu Isnu Bi. Rav Yosef says, "I'm all three." in other words, he's commenting about his own issues. So Tana Rabbanan, like a person, just imagine a person has OCD, right? Yeah. A person's got to constantly wash their hands. He's a germaphobe, right? Yeah. He has no life. He can't, right? All right, Tana Rabbanan Shlosha Son Ezeh. There are three parties which hate their own kind, and what are they? Elohein Haklovim, V'Harnagolim, V'Chaborim. Dogs, roosters, right? They fight. And Chaborim, I was asking the guys this morning what Chaborim means. Someone told me that in the art school it says a certain group of Persians, and it's not clear to me what that is. Some ethnicity. V'yesh omrim af hazonos. Some say prostitutes also are always, because they're rivals. They're trying to pick up the limited customers. V'yesh omrim af talmidei chachamim shebabafel. And some say that the rabbis in Babel, they're constantly arguing with each other. The Gemara does say that in Bavel the Talmidei Chachamim are wiser because they're constantly arguing with each other in the base medrash, but sometimes that leads to enmity among rabbis.
Yeah, further describes this as a violent and destructive group, these Persians.
Yeah, okay. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful about your colleagues sometimes. Tana Rabbanan Shlosha Oavin Zeh. There are three parties who love their own kind, and Elohein Hagerim Va'avadim Ve'orvim, converts, slaves, and ravens or crows. And possibly it's because they're a downtrodden class, all three, and so therefore they commiserate with each other. Arba Ein Adas Sovlas, and there are four kinds of people that are just like so obnoxious that you can't stand them. And what are they? Elohein Dal Ge'eh, an arrogant poor person. Just speak to some of our Gaboy Tzedakah, and you'll see what a Dal Ge'eh is. Sometimes a Mashulach comes, and he's a Dal Ge'eh.
The certificate
right.
Over and over, he's $1.
Yeah. And the Asher Mekachesh, a rich man who's obsequious and overly flattering. And Vizakein Menaif, an old man who's a philanderer. Come on, act your age already. And Uparnas Miskal Atzibra Bechinam, and a community leader who holds himself up with such pride, but he doesn't do anything for the community. In other words, he's an elected official, but he does absolutely nothing, and so he takes all the pride and takes all the glory, but he does nothing when people need him. Some say that an obnoxious person is he who divorces his wife once or twice and then takes her back. So the Gemara says, V'Tanakama, why doesn't the Tanakama count that person as being like just obnoxious? Because make up your mind already. The answer is Zimna Diksuvasa Meruba Inami Yesh Labanim Hemena Velamatzi Megarishla. Sometimes he'd like to get rid of her, but it costs too much. The alimony payment, the ksuva, is going to cost too much, so he'll take her back. And sometimes he'll take her back because he has children and he doesn't want to break up the family. So even though I can't stand her, we fight like cats and dogs. So I kick her out of the house, but I'll take her back for the sake of the children, right?
What the halachas are about a second marrying the same woman twice?
Well, relations in between.
She can't get married. When she gets
if he has
married,
relations
you can't take her
with
back.
somebody else.
No. If she does, no. If she gets married, married to somebody else,
a
woman cannot. If Reuven divorces Leah, and then Leah remarries, and then her second husband divorces her or dies, then Reuven can't remarry her. But as long as she wasn't married in the interim to another man, he's always allowed to remarry, unless he's a Kohen. It sounds like from the Gemara that it's discouraged.
Right.
Make up your mind already. It's because the whole reason of a machzir grushaso is aser is because it makes a mockery out of marriage if you're so indecisive, right? But yes, yet it's still permitted if if there's a pressing need. Chamisha dvar mtziva Kenan es banav. There were 5 things that Canaan gave charge to his children. It doesn't literally mean that he gave this commandment, but it means that these are 5 characteristics of the Canaanite people. Ehevu ze'ezeh, love each other. Ve'evu es hageza, love thievery. Ve'evu es hazima, love licentiousness. V'sinu es adonechem, hate your masters. Ve'al tadabru emes, and never speak the truth. So these are things that are common among the Canaanites who are known as the slaves of the world. In other words, traditionally the progeny of Canaan have been a slave class. Shisha dvarm nemrim besus. There are 6 things that are said about horses. Ohev es haznus, he loves his mares. Ve'ohev es hamilchama, he loves war. Berucho gasa, he's arrogant. Umoes es hashena, he hates sleep. V'ochel harbe, he eats a lot. Umotzi kima, and he excretes little. V'yesh omrim af mevakesh laharog ba'olov b'milcham. And some say that the 7th item is that he can't wait to kill his rider in war. He likes to buck his rider. Shiva minudim lashamayim. There are 7 kinds of people who God feels are like they're on the outs in the eyes of heaven. And Eluhain, Yehudi, and some have a different girsa of just a person, me, she'ein lo isha, a man who doesn't have a wife. Now, of course, we're not saying that single men are on the outs with God all the time. It's if a person has the opportunity to get married and he doesn't take advantage of that. And similarly, v'sheyesh lo isha ve'ein lo banim, if a person has a wife and not children, meaning that he has the ability to have children but neglects to do so. U'mi sheyesh lo banim ve'ein megadol m'talmid Torah, if a person has children and sons specifically and doesn't teach them Torah. And also similarly, if a person doesn't put on tefillin, a person doesn't wear tzitzis, and a person doesn't put a mezuzah on his house. These are things that these people are considered to be on the outs with heaven. And also a person who doesn't put shoes on, because by not wearing shoes, you're making yourself vulnerable unnecessarily. Alternatively, a person, this is very important, lahalacha, if you have the opportunity to go to a bris, to go to a chasana, and you don't go, that's also considered to be sinful. Amar Rabba bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Marta, Amar Rav Mishum Rabbi Yossi, Ish Hutzal, Minayin shein shoelin b'kaldiim. How do you know that you're not supposed to consult with fortune tellers or astrologers? Shenamar tamim tiya im Hashem Elokecha. As it says, be innocent with the Lord your God. In other words, there are certain kinds of fortune telling that are absolutely prohibited, right? But even the permissible kinds of, let's say, astrology, where they just give you they tell you your horoscope, even that you're not supposed to do, because it says, be innocent with God. Don't try to seek out the future. How do you know that if you have someone who's a colleague of yours and he's superior to you even in one area of knowledge? How do you know? Like, you may think, well, I know a lot more Torah than he does. Yeah, but the thing is that he knows one area of wisdom that you don't know. You still have to respect him for that one thing. And how do you know this? Shenamar, because it says by Daniel, it says Kol kaval di ruach yatira bei umalka asis lahakamuse al kol malchusa. It says that Daryavish, who was the king at the time, elevated Daniel because he had one aspect of knowledge or spirit that would made him ascendant or made him superior to his other colleagues. And then the next thing is V'hayosheves al dam tohor asura l'shamesh and adkama amar Rav Ona. Also, we know that there's a halacha that if a woman menstruates during the first 40 days of after childbirth for a boy, or for the first 80 days for childbirth for a girl, this is called dam tohar, which means that we don't reckon with it as menses blood, and therefore once if she goes to the mikveh after day 40, she's completely tahor and permitted to her husband. The only thing is that if a woman was bleeding during that period of time, you should wait after day 40 when she goes to the mikveh. You should wait a certain period of time, which is a 12-hour period, because there may be some lingering discharge from that initial 40 days, which would render her a real actual nida. And therefore, use caution and don't be with your wife immediately after the 40 days or 80-day period. Wait 12 hours. Tana, hu Yosef Yishutzal, hu Yosef Habavli, hu Isi ben Gur Aryai, hu Isi ben Yehuda, hu Isi ben Gamliel, hu Isi ben Mahalal El, hu Mashemo, Isi ben Akavya. There's a certain rabbi whose real name was Isi ben Akavya, but he was known as Yosef, the man of Hutzal. He was known as Yosef the Bavli. He was known as Isi, which is sort of like a nickname for, or an alternate name for Yosef. Ben Gur Aryai, the son of the crouching lion, Isi, the son of Yehuda, Isi, the son of Gamliel. All of these are appellations either for him or for his father, who was a great man as well. Hu Rabbi Yitzchak ben Tavla, hu Rabbi Yitzchak ben Chakla, hu Rabbi Yitzchak ben Ila'a. These are all names of Rabbi Yitzchak, whose father also was deserving of different appellations, and therefore we want to just clarify that these are all the same person. And Rabbi Yitzchak ben Acha de Shmaita, who Rabbi Yitzchak ben Pinchas de Agadita. And furthermore, there's a Rabbi Yitzchak who is known as Rabbi Yitzchak ben Acha. That's the name that is given to him when he cites halachic discussions in the Gemara. And he's known as Rabbi Yitzchak ben Pinchas when he cites Agadic passages, homiletics in the Gemara, the Simaneich. And the way to remember which, when he's known as Rabbi Yitzchak ben Acha and when he's known as Rabbi Yitzchak ben Pinchas rather, is based on the pasuk is the pasuk of Shimuna Achai v'Raiai, that listen, my brothers. So Shimuna, Shmaita, is from Shimuna, which is a halachic discussion, and that's when he's known as Ben Acha, the son of Acha. Amar Rabba bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishmei de Rabbi Yehuda b'Rabbi Eloi, Achol batzal v'shev b'tzel, v'lo techol avozim v'tarnagolim v'yehi libcha rodef alecha. That he says a good eitzah. He says, eat onions and sit in the shade of your home. In other words, spend a little bit less money on groceries by eating inexpensive vegetables, and that way you'll be able to afford your mortgage and sit in the shadow of your home. Because if you eat fatty meats, which are more expensive, your heart will constantly have sort of like a vice, this appetite for expensive foods, and you won't be able to afford your mortgage. And therefore, in general, if you diminish your appetite for food and the good life, you'll be able to have a nicer home. You'll be able to add on to your home. Ki asa Ula Omar mitla mitlin b'marava. Ula said that there's an analogy or a parable that they give in Eretz Yisrael. Da'achil alita tashi ba'alita. That if a person eats the tail, which is the expensive fatty part of the animal, he's going to have to hide in the attic. It's a play on words. Alita with an aleph leads to hiding in the alita with an ayin. Why are you going to have to hide in the attic? Because you'll have creditors and you're going to have to hide from them. So, however, da'achil kakule akikli demasa shachif. But if you eat kakule, which is vegetables, you'll be able to sit out in the open on the garbage heap of the neighborhood where everyone can see you, because you won't have any debts. And so, better to live, not to live large, live with a meager subsistence, and that way you won't have to worry about your creditors. Have a wonderful Shabbos.